Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. My name is Kyle Eason with Inception Integrated Marketing, and I'm here with episode number 8's guest, Paul Vorreiter. Paul is a presentation coach, trainer, speaker, and owner of reflectivespark.com. I first met Paul a couple of years ago at Denver Startup Week and just immediately struck up a friendship with Paul. And when we started talking about creating some kind of show, we didn't know what it was at the time, but you were one of the first people that I talked to, and so I'm really glad to have you here today.
It's great to be here.
We'll let Paul tell us a little bit about himself and what brought him here today at The Kick.
Well, I think, Kyla, one of the things that I've actually loved to do throughout my career is work with entrepreneurs and companies and help them find that special thing that makes them unique. That's why the company is called Reflective Spark, is I come in and really work with you and figure out who you are, and then we figure out one way or two ways that we can actually help your business grow. Whether a lot of times I work in the funding world and with startups that are looking for money and are raising capital for their startup groups. And that's really what I enjoy doing, is figuring out what that specific thing is that makes them unique, and then we capitalize that and make it more just whatever it is. So what we really do is we just capitalize on it and transform that language around what makes them unique into something that's really special for them, and people can really get a sense of what those companies are like.
I know with Reflective Spark, you have a lot of really specific, very pragmatic tips that you give to folks in terms of sharpening their presentation, getting to know their audience, making sure that you have done all the preparation you can do in order to make it good. So there's not a certain kind of magic necessarily to making a good presentation. It does take a little bit of work and preparation.
Right, and one of the things that we all get stuck in our heads with is this presentation or an investor pitch group, standing up in front of an investor group. You have to be perfect. And what I've really seen, and what I think a lot of the industry is seeing, is that the more you're you and unique and authentic, the more the audience really does, kind of become really intrigued with who you are. And so what a lot of times when I coach folks, it's really about just finding who they are and letting that shine through, versus all these things that we have in our head about we have to be perfect. What do I do with my hands? I'm mumbling, all of those things. We just relax a little bit. We figure out what types of things really connect with the audience. And you have to know who that audience really is. And the more you really focus on what that group or what those people want from you, the better it actually is for them as a presentation, and more connection you have with the audience.
That's an interesting point you bring up about authenticity. And I think one of the things that's glossed over a lot of times with that term is the vulnerability that can go along with that too. And that's what really makes people appreciate you, I think, and endears you to others, is that you're not perfect. And so being yourself and letting that shine through seems to be one of the things that you're able to kind of elicit from your audience. I think sometimes when I've seen you speak, I think you're able to sort of bring that out of folks, or at least make people aware that, hey, that can shine through, and that's a plus, that's a strength.
Yeah, well, and it's really interesting to see what happens when you get rid of all those things that we think are a professional speaker and really become just a normal person, and you embrace the audience a little bit more. You step out of that weird kind of feeling that you have, and so it makes a big difference when you actually throw out all that stuff and you become more real. We have a smell factor. I call it this icky factor. It's this, oh my goodness, I can't stand this person because they're putting on an act. And as soon as they do that, especially in front of an audience, they lose all credibility with this, because that's not the world we live in anymore. You hear the term professional speaker, and it's one of those things that just makes you kind of smarmy feeling, kind of this weirdness that you go, I don't like that anymore. And so the more we're more real, the more we feel like you could sit down and have a conversation with somebody, is really the best way to connect with an audience these days.
The show is called The Kick, and it's really about special ideas or visionary ideas that help to awaken and inspire others, maybe take them up a level in terms of their awareness. And what would you say is that kick for you? What is your kick?
For me, as we talked about this a little earlier too, and it's just, for me, I love to see somebody come out of this shell and what really makes them unique. You know, from my training in the agency world and creative world is we always try to find what are those differentiators, what are those uniquenesses to each company and to each individual. Every team I've ever led and every team I've been involved with has a bunch of unique people involved with it. And the more they realize that uniqueness is something to embrace and to capitalize onto, that's the part that actually something magical happens there. I had a team which they were inaffectionately called the Lone Rangers at one point. Mm-hmm. And it was all of those folks on this team that nobody of the other groups wanted to have. Mm-hmm. And I wanted the Lone Rangers because I wanted to see what I could do with that team and to really find out what made them unique and capitalize on those things. Mm-hmm. And so a year later, after I was inherited this Lone Ranger team, we were dynamic because we all learned how to work together. Mm-hmm. And that's for me what the kick part is learning how you think. And it really kind of ties into the book I'm writing, which is coming up here in July. So
mm-hmm. I want to hear about that,
yeah.
But I wanted to step back just a bit because you alluded to your experience as a creative director,
sure.
And we hadn't really talked about much about your background. What is it about your background that sort of led you here today?
Well, it's really interesting. Spending so much time in the agency world and creative world, I always thought like a marketer, and so. When I design creative artwork and ads and those types of things, I always thought, well, who's going to buy it? And then I just transitioned that into what does an art director do then? How do we lead a team? How do we create specific, interesting advertisements for whether that's in any of the different types of industries I worked with? You try to find something that's unique mm-hmm. and how you differentiate that. Mm-hmm. So that's really what I end up doing as a creative director is we've figured out, what's dynamic enough to be sold. Mm-hmm. And so I spend a lot of time in the agency world, a lot of time as a designer, and we transition that into now. I do a lot of that now with investor pitch deck slides as well as presentation slides. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty much the same thing I was doing back then. It's just mm-hmm. we call it differently now. Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned a book that you're working on or have finished, and we always like to talk about what's next for our guests.
Sure.
So what do you have coming up, and how are you communicating that, getting that out to your audience?
Well, right now I'm in the final process of writing a book on creativity. Mm-hmm. And what I realized, and this came through different conversations with a lot of folks, is I would say, well, do this, 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 and this, and they go, well, that's really hard to do. And I said, no, it's not. It's easy. It's a creative technique we use every day in a creative design world. And not everybody knows those in the business world. And so that's what the book is all about. Strategies to help you revolutionize your thinking and creative techniques and exercises that you use with your team that transform how your teams think and how you actually come to that innovation cycle of we've got to be more creative. We've got to come up with better ideas faster. And that's what Unleash creativitybook.com is all about. Mm-hmm, so.
Mm-hmm. I think it's appropriate given what Reflective Spark is all about and your kick sort of unleashing that authentic self, maybe mm-hmm. something like that.
Yeah, it really is. And it's techniques that I've learned and based on a lot of brain science that I've really studied this last year. It's absolutely amazing. It's these things that, like an example, I have these large rolls of paper in my office. And I'll take those to clients every once in a while, and we'll draw a timeline or a pitch presentation on these large rolls of paper. Mm-hmm. And we stand while we do that, and that something magical happens when we're standing and we're drawing with our hands that we've forgotten about when all we're doing now is input with our keys. Mm-hmm. And so it makes a big difference in what happens at the end of that presentation mm-hmm. or at the end of that exercise. Mm-hmm. It really is interesting. It's a lot more fun, too. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of a physical component to it.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So how are you getting the word out about your new book and what you're up to, what Reflective Spark is all
sure. about?
Tell us about your websites and that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, you can find about when I speak here in town. I actually just submitted 2 more sessions for Denver Startup Week coming up here mm-hmm. this fall. One is on creativity, and the other, of course, is on pitch decks again. But I speak and teach around the country on creativity and presentations as a professional speaker, so I'll speak at conferences. So you can always find stuff where I'm going to speak next and where I'm going to be on the website at reflectivespark.com. So,
fantastic. Well, I mean, that was just textbook show of the kick. Appreciate it. Well done. Thanks for joining us again, folks. And again, I'm Kyle Eason, Paul Vorreiter for the kick. Have a good day.